Hi, I'm Rachel Fayne, and welcome to this edition of Beyond the Book. Today we're going to be talking about audiobooks and ebooks, have a discussion with a well-known political author and analyst who lives right here in Palm Beach County, and explore some Palm Beach literary landmarks. So stay with me as we go Beyond the Book. The library offers a variety of classes on how to use devices like iPads, Nooks, and Kindles. Some branches even have individual sessions. So go online or stop by your local branch for a complete listing.
We've been offering ebooks and downloadable audiobooks for about 6 years now. We work with two different vendors to provide them. We've got Overdrive Collection, and that includes about 11,000 titles at this point. And then we recently started the 3M Book Cloud service, which adds an additional about 500 titles to our collection. If you have any kind of device, basically, if you're using a computer at home, you can download these things to your computer to read them. If you're using some sort of portable device like an iPhone, iPad, Kindle, a Android phone, pretty much anything, you're going to be able to log into our service from home, check out an ebook, and download it to your device and start reading it right there. On our iPad here, we have installed the Overdrive iPad app. This is right here. This app's available for free in the App Store. So if we were to access the App Store, just do a search for Overdrive. Should be one of the first ones that comes up, Overdrive Media Console. And then you can install that app as you would any other app. So if I open that app up, it's going to show us, these are books that I've already downloaded. If I wanted to get books, I'm going to click the Get Books button. That'll take us to the Palm Beach County Library ebook collection. And at this point I can start browsing. I can do a search using this search box up here. But for example, let's just take a look at all the new ebooks we've got. And I can just start browsing these, and when I find one that I want to check out, let's take a look at the next page. Let's go ahead, let's get this one right here. I just tap on that. This will give me all the information about the book. I can scroll down to read the description, but I just want to borrow this, so I'm going to click Borrow. I'm going to download it, and just as quick as that, if I go back to my bookshelf, that book is here, and I just tap on it to start reading it. I think the most popular things at this point are the fiction, the bestsellers, the romance type things, mystery, that sort of thing. But there is also some activity on the nonfiction side, and especially I'm seeing a rise in the children's material being checked out. I can only imagine that's because of the rise of the full-color internet devices that are coming out. Budget allows us to add about between 200 and 300 titles to the collection each month. So the usage that we've seen over the years has essentially doubled each year that we've used it or had it. So we take that into account, and we're continually adjusting the budget to allow us to purchase more of this type of material. To use the collection, you need three things. You need a library card, you need the software that allows you to access the collection, and then you also need some sort of internet connection, whether that be something at home or through a mobile device. So using the software and your library card, you would log into the site, browse to find out what you would like to check out, hit borrow, and it'll download it into the software on your device, and then you'd use that software to actually do the reading.
The Florida Department of State has commemorated 2013, the 500th year anniversary when Ponce de Leon first landed on Florida shores. The Palm Beach County Library System is helping in this anniversary by exposing our children and residents to a variety of programs, local literature, and events meant to commemorate Florida's rich history. Florida boasts easily one of the most culturally diverse and uniquely historical heritages in the United States. What better way to celebrate Florida's 500th birthday than with a year-long celebration? Be there to go back in time with us and explore what made some of the world's most fascinating cultures come together as the Palm Beach County Library System takes part in this Florida-wide series.
This is a program on the Palm Beaches in the year 1513, which is the year Juan Ponce de Leon discovered the state of Florida. And we're going to be doing a presentation of the tribes and the cities that were in Palm Beach County during the year 1513. And we're going to be showing the route Ponce de Leon used from Puerto Rico to Florida, the places that he stopped in Jupiter Inlet and the island of Palm Beach, and the tribes that were there at the time of his discovery.
Because 2013 marks the 500th year of initial European contact, our library system is hosting a variety of events to celebrate the occasion. Beginning with Palm Beach County in the year 1513, the programs will explore all the ways in which all kinds of diverse nationalities and cultures shaped and subsequently thrived in Florida. Whether it's about the first settlers in Florida or the first railroad built, the library is a great place for local history, especially on someone like Henry Flagler, whose house was right here in Palm Beach.
The Flagler era invokes the grand living of the Gilded Age in the United States, a period of quick population growth from immigration, extreme industrial expansion that created great wealth, and lavish displays of that wealth. As Henry Flagler built his railroad empire along the Florida East Coast, that wealth and growth would stop right here on Palm Beach Island.
Henry really brought the Florida East Coast Railway into Palm Beach, fell in love with the area, and he created the winter resort destination that it is by building the Hotel Royal Point Sienna first, and then secondary, the Breakers Hotel. They were the two big properties, and then his third construction project on the island was Whitehall, his home, that opened in 1902.
And when you have the idea of Henry Flagler arriving in Palm Beach, bringing in the train, and all of a sudden development takes off, it explodes, everybody starts to think that, well, this is really a modern community.
The Last Train to Paradise, written by Les Standiford, is about the project, the Overseas Railroad project, the construction from Miami to Key West. It was 156 miles of railroad track, primarily over open ocean water. When it began, people were very skeptical about the project in general, calling it Flagler's Folly, and people didn't think it could be done. But when it was completed in January 1912, it changed from being called Flagler's Folly to the greatest accomplishment of Henry Flagler's lifetime, and was known as the eighth wonder of the world. This is part of the first train to arrive in Key West. Henry Flagler rode down on this. The day they got there were 10,000 residents came out to welcome Henry Flagler.
And as this book ends on a somber note of destruction of the railroad from the fury of the 1935 Labor Day hurricane, another novel uses Palm Beach's setting on a brighter note of the grand lifestyle of the island. Theodore Pratt writes about this same lavish settlement in his fictitious novel, The Flame Tree, Florida in the Fabulous Days of the Royal Ponciana Hotel. His main characters, Tip Totten, one of the first white hunters to roam the mysterious tropical Everglades, and wife Jenny, are divided by the two worlds, the extravagant luxury on the island and the duress of Florida's poorer, earlier pioneer life. Jenny Totten comes to know each of these worlds and is forced ultimately to make a choice between them and between the two men by whom they are personified by. Leaving the earlier pioneer days for a modern memoir is more to your liking, the Palm Beach County Library has a love story that is co-authored by married couple Pamela Atchison and Richard Myers. A Year in Palm Beach, Life in an Alternate Universe. They write about the adventures among Palm Beach's mega yachts, mansions, and millionaires. On one of the world's wealthiest islands, turns into a life-changing event. The memoir gives readers a chance to live a vivacious, fun, adventurous year in Palm Beach.
The older the better. With luck, they died right after the wedding.
Marry me.
We're talking a settlement of $20 million. Oh, darling.
Heartbreakers. Palm Beach never lets anybody film. It's one of the richest communities on the face of the earth. It's a gorgeous city. I mean, the architecture there is just impeccable because there is so much money, and everywhere you look, there's really not a bad angle in the whole town.
The cast and crew were excited about getting to film at the legendary Breakers Hotel, one of the most famous and historic hotels in the United States.
The staff there was amazing. It was a scene where we had to drop a dead body, a dummy, out of a fifth-story balcony. And every time you drop it, you got to bring it back up the elevator. And I was helping out and bringing this dummy up and down. And you know, any other hotel would have thrown us out. I don't know that the guests knew exactly what was going on. So you got this guy running around with what looks like a corpse in a sheet. No questions asked, and they were very, very nice to us.
From books to films, Palm Beach Island is a great place to visit, to see and feel these actual settings.
The library is one of the best places to hear some of the area's best-selling authors. Local resident and nationally recognized political analyst Dr. Robert Watson visited the library to discuss his latest book, Affairs of State. So thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Dr. Watson.
My pleasure, Rachel.
So we're sitting here at Lynn, where I know you teach, but you're also an accomplished author. You've published, is it over 30 books?
34, I think.
Is that right? Wow. Is there one that stands out as a favorite that you've written? I know that's a tough question.
Yeah, well, it is. Well, they're all challenging. My new one, I guess I'm very excited about. It's called Affairs of State, because it's unlike anything I've ever done before. It looks at the history of all the scandals and love affairs and mistresses in the history of the presidency, the presidential picadillos, as we say. So that's kind of fun because it was just so different, and I've never done anything like it. And it took me a lot longer to do that book than any other book I've ever done. Because let's say, for example, I did a book on Harry Truman's role in the creation of Israel. So I go to the Truman Presidential Library, I get all the documents, I interview people that were there, put a cover on it, and you got a book. But this, it's hard to find out who the presidential mistresses were. Mm-hmm. So it took years of reading diaries and playing historical detective, and probably 9 out of 10 times when I would get a clue and start following it, it would turn up that there was no scandal there. So I had a lot of dead ends. So it took quite a while, but it was a challenge and it was fun. And I think more than just telling the stories of the misbehavior, although there are stories of misbehavior there in case if people want to read them, but more so it's this, it's kind of it helps breathe some life into our presidents. So we tend to put our leaders in marble. George Washington is more monument than man, more myth, right, than flesh and blood. So by learning about when George Washington was a teenager, for example, I found out he had acne and got dumped by girls. You know, you never read that in the textbooks.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. So that breathes some life into him, and I think it helps the personalizing, which I think is what is missing from a lot of historical books.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned research. How do you even begin researching something like that? What do you go to?
Well, one thing was I contacted archivists at libraries, presidential homes, and contacted scholars and would see if there's a lead out there. You know, and I would have questions. For example, I'd say, did Thomas Jefferson have a girlfriend before he got married? Sure, everyone did. Well, then who was it? And then did she have a diary she left behind? Who was her best friend, so we can find out if any letters have survived? And oftentimes these letters do survive. For example, I found a letter written by a teenage George Washington after one local beauty dumped him, and he writes one of these almost like a roses are red, violets are blue poem. He writes that something to the effect of, my poor wounded heart has been shot through by Cupid's dart. You know, so I found that, so I reprinted it in the book, and I thought that was good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, of course, except for me, you know, what guy hasn't been dumped as a kid and had acne, and you know, of course we all have. So that was fun.
Do you have, out of all the presidents that you've studied, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I like Harry Truman. I'm a big Harry Truman fan. I think he was the last president to lack a college degree. He grew up in a racist and anti-Semitic household and became one of the great human rights leaders in all of history. This is a president who puts his presidency on the line to help establish Israel and right the wrongs of the Holocaust. Yet he grew up in an anti-Semitic household. This is a president who wants to push desegregation of the U.S. Armed Forces. And even though the Joint Chiefs oppose him and Congress opposes him, he integrates the military, despite growing up in a racist household, descended from slave owners. This is a president whose family was so bitter about the South losing the war that they wouldn't allow the name Abraham Lincoln to be mentioned in their household. So it's funny, when Truman gets to the White House, he writes a letter back home, which still survives. And in the letter he says, "My favorite room in the White House is the Lincoln bedroom, but don't tell Mama." So I mean, here he is, the president, but don't tell anyone I like Lincoln. So that kind of stuff is, I love stories of great wars and great battles and decisions, but I'm more interested in what the presidents ate for breakfast on a Tuesday, or what kind of husbands they were, or what their hobbies were, because that helps me to relate to them more. I mean, not many of us have rolled up in an armored limousine and had Marines salute as you walk down a red carpet, but all of us have had acne, or all of us have struggled with bills, or Truman went bankrupt basically 3 times in his life. So any person that struggled in their life, they could relate to someone like Harry Truman, and more importantly, he could relate to them.
Now, I know you've done a lot of work on first ladies too, right? What about, is there a first lady that you like the best?
Yeah, I wrote a book on the first ladies, and I edited an encyclopedia set on the first ladies and some other things. I'm a big Eleanor Roosevelt fan because I think she was the first lady of the world. It's easier to say what Eleanor didn't do than what she did do. She was courageous. She was decades ahead of her time. She was a champion of the downtrodden. But probably the most interesting first lady that I like to write about was James Madison's wife, Dolly. Dolly Madison wore low-cut, cleavage-revealing dresses in a day and age when no one did that. She could chew snuff and drink. She was sophisticated and elegant. She was politically minded. She was opinionated. She was a great hostess. They called her Queen Dolly. She was an amazing woman. And I think maybe my favorite Dolly Madison story was during the War of 1812 and 1814, the British marched into Washington, D.C., virtually unopposed. Our soldiers dropped their guns and run. And the British burned the capital city, and they burned the White House. And Dolly's back at the White House with an aide, and James Madison, the president, is out in the field with the soldiers. So he's worried that she's going to be caught, burned, or captured or something. So he dispatches a rider to go and tell Dolly, "Please get out of there, the British are coming." And Dolly sends the rider back. She stays in the White House with a note, and the note says, "I refuse to abandon my post." So she was like a soldier. And what happens at the 11th hour, right before the British torch the White House, she preserves and collects all the priceless artifacts in the White House, loads them onto a wagon, and including, if you've seen the famous Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington wearing a black suit where he's kind of standing like this, she saves that priceless portrait from America's founding. So she was, on top of everything else, she was brave and courageous. So just, she's a fascinating person. And it points to the fact that we've ignored the powers behind the throne. Behind every successful man, as the bumper sticker says, is a woman, whereas behind every successful woman, as the bumper sticker says, is herself, right? So Dolly Madison was definitely a power behind the throne. There was even saying it when she was First Lady, people would say, "I could defeat Madison if only it wasn't for Dolly." So she was fascinating.
I know you've also written extensively about Lincoln as well. And there are some similarities between Lincoln and Obama, even. I know they were both excellent public speakers.
Illinois, tall, thin, had rough upbringings. Lincoln's probably my second favorite president behind Truman. And how can you not love Abraham Lincoln? I mean, rags to riches. It's the quintessential kind of American success story. And Lincoln was brilliant, compassionate, humane, funny. And Daniel Day-Lewis and Steven Spielberg did a good job of bringing him to life. But the problem is for us is Lincoln lived in the pre-video, pre-audio era. So we really can't appreciate how magnificent and warm and funny he was. Because all we know Lincoln today is from a picture, and here he's kind of smiling a little bit. He looks tired. But basically we know Lincoln by a picture where he's going, so if you meet someone like a Bill Clinton or a Ronald Reagan who is very charismatic, they just ooze that charisma. Well, Lincoln must have had that times 10, but we can't really fully appreciate it. But having read Lincoln for my entire adult life, the guy was just incredible. Plus, he was flat out hilarious. Lincoln would always joke and say, people always said that he was homely, and Lincoln would say, "Well, there's no problem with being homely, don't you know? After all, the good Lord prefers ugly people. That's why he made so many of us," he would always say. So he was always playing with jokes like that, and he would sometimes tell his audiences, he would say, of course, nobody knew what the president looked like back then. It's not like we had, CNN or this channel. So Lincoln would get up and say, "Now that I'm on stage, I can finally see all of you, and you can all finally see what I look like, and I think we'd all agree that I've got the better end of that bargain." So he'd always say something cute like that, and you know, so he would make people laugh, and he was just a brilliant man. And so I mean, he's an irresistible figure from history. And of course, struck down right after the war ends and saves the Union, the great emancipator. What's not to like about that story? So,
yeah. Well, most authors that I meet are avid readers, obviously.
Yeah.
Is there an author that you like, or a specific genre that you read?
Well, I love history, and I love H.W. Brands. I love Doris Kearns Goodwin. I love David McCullough, John Meekum. I'm probably the same list that other people like. But what I do is I would say I read as many books outside of politics and history as I do inside of it. I always like Stephen Jay Gould, the kind of controversial biologist and evolutionary guy. I love to read about human history and evolution and human biology. I loved Kurt Vonnegut, who was a wicked satirist, and you know, he always seemed to have a whoopee cushion with him when he was writing. And I loved Gore Vidal, even if I didn't always agree with stuff that he wrote. I found him to be at the least provocative and controversial. Yeah, I liked Carl Sagan, the great scientist who basically taught a Cosmos. The series was unbelievable. The book and the old movies. Carl Sagan basically taught a generation about science and astronomy. And so I probably read as much outside of my supposed area as I do within it, just because I think, you know, I think the more well-rounded you are and the more you read in one area, it benefits another area. If I understand the role of women throughout history, it maybe helps me write about military history. So it's not that I oftentimes get to sit back with a novel. You know, a lot of my day-to-day reading is work reading. Then on a weekend or in the summers, I like to sit back with funner, lighter subjects.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're working on a book now. It was on the War of 1812?
It's on the War of 1812, yeah. So we're in the bicentennial right now. The War of 1812 lasted till 1815, January of 1815, Battle of New Orleans. So this year, next year, and a little bit after, we have the bicentennial of a very important war, some fascinating battles with some scoundrels and some villains and some great heroes. And it's sort of America's forgotten war. Harry Truman called it our silliest damn war we ever fought. So it's this fascinating war, but because it's stuck between the Revolution and the Civil War, it's like the middle kid, you know, it doesn't get any attention. So I'm trying to bring to life some of the heroes and key battles, and I think it was a war that we went into the war, for example, as a collection of states that were dysfunctional and, you know, still arguing with the French, the British, the Spanish, and the American Indian. And you know, when we wrote back then United States, we'd write small letter U, United capital letter S, almost describing states. After the War of 1812, we're capital letter U, we're the United States, not these United States. It really helped make us a nation. And I think it was one of the key turning points in American history that the textbooks kind of ignore. So I've had a blast with the book and can't wait to see it come out.
That's great.
But, so there it is.
Well, thank you so much.
My
it was
pleasure,
an absolute
Rachel.
pleasure meeting you. Yeah,
Pleasure.
thank you.
Sure.
Here are some tips and tricks to help inspire the writer in you.
If you want to be a writer, you are a writer. All it takes is for you to sit down and pick up that pen or go to that keyboard. The advice I would give is you must persevere. Every writer gets rejections. And it depends on how many rejections you want to have, how long you continue writing. Another thing is rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. You have to have something on paper, even if it isn't good. Put it down so that it can be edited and it can be improved on. And that's the trick of the game. It's perseverance.
There's always something going on at the library for children of all ages. Youth Services Coordinator Scylla Jacobson is here to tell us about some of those programs.
We have story time is basically what people come into the children's area for, other than children's books and DVDs and so on. They come to find out if we offer story times, and we do. We have, as I said, we have story times and programs for from birth to high school, actually. For babies, we have a lap sit, and we have little nursery rhymes that the children bounce on their laps with their moms. It's a Mommy and Me program where they do little nursery rhymes with them and little short stories, and then they have some toys that they sit on the floor and play with. And the moms get to know each other, and the babies start to know about the library. They're learning what books are, and that you read from books, that you get an entertainment from books. And so even for programs that we have for the very, very young, the little babies, we use books. We show them books. Babies respond very well to board books that have babies in them. They recognize that's a baby too. And there are special board books that are made for babies, and babies learn very quickly that it's entertaining to look at a book. Now, the parent, in reading the book to the child, shows the child that you start at the beginning and you turn the pages, and that's how you read it. And they learn to recognize that the pictures are right side up as opposed to upside down. It doesn't take very long for a baby to understand about a book. And children get favorite books. They find favorite books in story times. They'll go home and say, "Oh, Mommy, I want to read that story about the rabbit that the librarian read today." And then Mommy goes back to the library and checks the book out, takes it home and reads it for bedtime, sometimes over and over and over. There should be something for everybody at the library. And we do have books in Spanish, and we have some books in Creole. We have librarians and children's staff who can speak Spanish, who can do Spanish story times. It's nice to have a story time where they're getting a little English and a little Spanish. And oftentimes we find parents of English-speaking children who like to bring them to Spanish story time, bilingual story time, so that their child will learn some of the other language. You don't have to be a certain age to get a library card. You can come to the library on your way home from the hospital from having the baby and get a library card for your baby. And it's the first piece of identification that a baby can have is a library card. And we introduce the parents at that time to the fact that we have story times for babies. And they can learn then to make the library part of the training that they give their child.
There are a lot of programs and services constantly happening at the library. Your local library is filled with all types of information just waiting to be explored. And it goes beyond books. There are a lot of tools and services that the Palm Beach County Library System have to offer, and they're free. I'm Rachel Fayne, and this is Beyond the Book.